Can So hello, thank you for joining us. Welcome to 1,000 Words, the Delaware Canal and Photos, Old and New. My name is Cindy Kunis, and I'm with the Delaware River Greenway Partnership. The GRGP promotes, protects, and preserves the Delaware River. We have the Heritage Lecture Series as one of our programs. We also have the Scenic Byway and Water Trail programs, as well as administering the Lower Delaware Wild Scenic. So what's coming up? Using assemblage of photos of the Delaware Canal, ranging from an era when mules pulled the cargo-laden boats to today, when the canal can be a scenic wonder. Susan Taylor, our presenter, will share stories of the canal's past and hopes for its future. Did you know the canal is 58.9 miles long and runs from Easton to Bristol? And a little bit about Susan Taylor. She was the executive director, actually the first executive director of Friends of the Delaware Canal for over 30 years. So walking the full length of the canal every year, leading guiding tours and developing interpretive signs, and meeting so many people allowed her to develop a rich knowledge of the canal and its surroundings. So going forward, please post your questions in the question and answer box, and we will get to them at the end. So everybody, Susan Taylor will be on, and enjoy the program.
Hi. Thank you, Cindy, for the lovely introduction. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about the Delaware Canal and show you lots of pictures. In that 30 years that I was executive director of the Friends, tens of thousands of photographs came across my desk and across my screen, especially since the Friends have a number of very, very talented photographers. Tonight, I'm going to be telling the story of the canal using some of my favorite photographs, and I hope I won't be using too many words. That's my goal. Here we are. As Cindy said, the Delaware Canal is 58.9 miles long, running from Easton to Bristol, Pennsylvania. And in essence, it is a ditch that's sometimes filled with water that runs essentially parallel to the Delaware River until you get down south to Morrisville, where the river takes a U-turn, and those very intelligent canal diggers dug their ditch straight across the U, saving themselves a lot of work. Today, tonight, I should say, while we're watching the photographs, keep your eyes open and do sing out in the Q&A section or in chat if you have some questions. Here we are in Easton with the Delaware River flowing southward. And in Easton, gulls love to congregate in the river. The Delaware Canal starts at the forks of the Delaware Canal. It's fed not by the Delaware River, but by the Lehigh River, where the river is dammed in order to feed water into the canal. Well, why the forks of the Delaware term? Well, in the 17 and 1800s, the Lehigh River was referred to as the West Branch of the Delaware River, thus the forks. In the middle of the picture, you'll see Lock 24, which is indeed the inlet for water for the Delaware Canal. After the floods of 2004, 5, and 6 created havoc along the Delaware Canal, causing millions and millions of dollars worth of damage, most of the repair work was done by 2010, and the Lehigh River water was reintroduced into the canal with great celebration. And I call this the big whoosh. Would that water could come into the Delaware Canal like this every day. Now we're going to go south. Mules pulled cargo fill boats on the Delaware Canal, not horses, not donkeys, and they were boats, not barges. This seasonal photo commemorates the fact that the Friends of the Delaware Canal have sponsored walks over 5 or 6 successive Saturdays for the last 35 years. And each walk begins with the blowing of the conch shell horn, which is the horn of choice for the old canal boatman. You pretty much want to know where you are along the Delaware Canal, and you can because of the installation of granite mile markers by the Friends of the Delaware Canal. And these are your happy and hearty canal marker installers who are volunteers. Going south to Robsville, there's this very, very lovely reflection of a church that that is now a residence. Here we come to Whitty's Camelback Bridge, and it's the most northern of the 6 remaining camelback bridges along the Delaware Canal. The Friends have made it their quest to see that all 6 of those authentic bridges are restored, and 5 are done, and some have been redone, thanks to the expert skills of contractor Randy Myers, who pretty much does this work all by himself. Carol Meebus is the photographer who has contributed most of the pictures of nature that the Friends have in their collection. She was up on the towpath looking out toward the river and zoomed in on this peaceful encounter between a bald eagle and a great blue heron. They shared a fish, but not without a little bit of kerfluffle. And this was on Facebook, and we got more than 50,000 hits on this peaceful encounter. Okay. This photo is an illustration of how in the north, the canal is in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. It runs from the foothills down to the Atlantic coastal plain. Between Robsville and Riegelsville, there was an industrial town called Eulersville. Okay. Don't you like the lady just intrepidly standing on the trolley track? Okay. It was also the location of locks 22 and 23, which have been combined into one lock. And ever since about 1929, Eulersville has progressively disappeared. And now you really can't tell that there was a very, very active industrial town. Currently, this area is called the Theodore Roosevelt Recreation Area of the Delaware Canal State Park. And the White House there is the original lock tender's house. Just south of blocks 22 and 23, this picture was taken in the early 1900s. You have the river out to your left. You have the Delaware Canal. You have River Road or Route 611, and you have the trolley line running from Easton to Doylestown up on the hillside. We've come to Regalsville, and this is the very scenic flag barn. The flag barn sits on the property of the founder of Regalsville, Benjamin Regal. Regalsville is also the place where you can see snow geese migrate through. They stop in the cornfields in town and then fly over to New Jersey for the night. Trogger's Farm is in the vicinity of Durham. It sits right along the canal. You can see all the fields, and their flower fields are absolutely stunning and a great attractor of butterflies, in this case, a monarch. And 'tis the season now for Trogger's. It's probably the most scenic place to buy your pumpkin that I can think of in Bucks County. Gallows Run Aqueduct is essentially a water bridge that carries the canal's water over an incoming stream. And you just never quite know what you're going to see along the canal. In this case, someone training his sled dog in the snow flurries. The Nockamixon Cliffs rise 300 feet straight up from the canal and the river. They're now part of the Delaware Canal State Park. Ice climbing is done on the cliffs. I think it's pretty insane, but they do it. And in the springtime, cliffs are covered with Dutchman's breeches. And here at the cliffs, if you're on the towpath and look out to Lynn Island, you'll be able to spot a bald eagle. Spotting bald eagles is actually quite common now along the Delaware Canal, even down in the Bristol area. Bald eagle's nest have been spotted on all three of the river islands that are part of the Delaware Canal State Park, and they're active nests. As you can see, eaglets aren't the cutest things in the whole world, are they? Coming south, we are still in the vicinity of the cliffs, but we come to Lock 20. Locks are water elevators where boats could change, go up or down on the Delaware Canal. This place was once called Narrowsville for good reasons, and there was a mill here. Today, it's hard to imagine that it was ever there. It was demolished in the 1930s. And here's what that same place looks like today. And you can see the drop off right to the river. So how a mill fit there is a good question. Maybe a lot of the bank eroded over time. The Narrowsville Hotel sat at the south end of the cliffs and was once the Indian Rock Hotel. There's a nearby rock face, looked like an Indian. And now it's again been named the Narrows. Canal boatmen wanted to get to the inns along the canal. So this is a new bridge that was built after the floods, connecting the towpath to the inn. This is a bird's eye photograph taken of Milford, New Jersey, and to the top of the photo and Upper Black Eddy on the lower half. The covered bridge across the river is still in existence. So this is probably taken. No, I won't go that far. Covered bridge still exists. I don't know what flood it went out in, probably 1903. And then, interestingly enough, you can also see the Delaware Canal in this photograph. And here are canal boats in the canal. The Homestead General Store is in Upper Black Eddy, and it's the only general store still operating along the Delaware Canal. Everybody can be refreshed at the Homestead store, including these tiger swallowtails that were puddling out on the towpath by the store. Tiger swallowtails take in minerals from the water in the soil. And here we are at Poor Spars Camelback Bridge. It is the only camelback that hasn't been restored. It has many issues, including having been damaged by earthquakes twice. One of the frequently asked questions about the Delaware Canal is, did canal boats pass each other? The canal itself looks pretty narrow, but the boats were only 10.5 feet wide. So 22 feet worth of canal boat in a 40-foot wide canal, yes, they can pass, but there were rules. The heavy boat back here, which is sitting low in the water, was required to stop and drop its tow rope, connecting the boat to the mule team, down into the water. And then the unloaded boat, riding high on the water, could just pass right over that rope and continue on its way. They both could keep right on going. Oops. Okay. This is Loch 19 at a little place that was called Lodi. The canal boats are sitting by the side. This is a wicket shanty, and Loch 19 is now the location of the Delaware Canal State Park headquarters. A really lovely photo of a fox out for a stroll on the frozen canal. And these are intrepid canal walkers out for a winter twilight walk, heading toward Euler's Town. Euler's Town is reputed to be the best preserved canal hamlet in America. You can go there today, and it looks very much like it did in the days that the canal was still running. This bird's eye view map shows a list of buildings and industry that was within Euler's Town. And it's called Euler's Town because Michael Euler left his brother Peter up there in Eulersville in near Robsville and came down and said, I'm taking advantage of this canal opportunity and building my own little town. And truly, nearly all of the things on this bird's eye view map were run by Michael Euler. This building was his general store and the post office. And the canal doesn't have any water in this picture, but it's sort of easy to visualize a canal boat pulling up right alongside here. This is an old view of Euler's town. There was a grist mill. Euler's town has the only covered bridge along the Delaware Canal. And it also has Lock 18. This is a view, that same view today, showing the covered bridge and the opening of Lock 18. And of course, Euler's town had a hotel and with lovely wrought iron balconies. Michael Euler was particularly fond of wrought iron balconies, and he had some on his own home. I call this the pile up of three. It's a wonderful catch by Carol Mebus. This photograph, taken in Irwina in probably the late 1920s, is the most the most reproduced photograph of the Delaware Canal. It's on book covers, appears again and again, because not only do you have a canal boat, you have the mules, you have mule tenders, and you have an inn. So it tells a lot of the story. At the time this photo was taken, it was known as Jacob Oberacker's Tap Room, and today you'll know it as the Golden Pheasant Inn. Just south of the Golden Pheasant, there's an S-curve in River Road with a canal bridge over it. Currently, PennDOT is proposing to flatten out the S-curve, make the bridge wider, change the towpath, put gabion baskets down on the towpath bank. So there's a lot to talk about before that happens, and a lot of significant impact involved with that proposal. So keep your ears open. Oops. Yeah. Sorry. Here's our founder, Betty Orleman, who in 1982 said, this place needs help, and I think I'm going to get people together. And she did. This is a postcard view of the lock 17 at Treasure Island. Treasure Island is out in the Delaware, and it was home to the camp for the Philadelphia Boy Scout Camp Council and home to Order of the Arrow. Postcards are often not labeled correctly. It says the locks, and there was only one lock. And Treasure Island, I believe, is partly Pennsylvania and partly New Jersey. And this is a more recent view of Lock 17. The river and the canal flow side by side, and it's very evident when the Delaware River floods that the canal is imperiled, because the flood will overtop the banks of the canal. And when it recedes, it takes the canal's banks right with it. This amazing photograph is a hummingbird nest. Tiny, tiny, and made out of lichen found on trees. And Carol just happened to notice it. The Cat and the Fiddle Inn is north of Point Pleasant, and the soda bar portion of the building is no longer there, but the inn itself is occupied as a residency. It has a very interesting history, including ownership by some daring circus performers. The circus performer built a water wheel to use canal water to generate electricity for the inn. And it was a scenic place along the canal. Not much of it is left, and it's even worse now. In Point Pleasant, we have the Towhegan Aqueduct. The Towhegan Aqueduct, which runs over the Towhegan Creek, is the longest aqueduct on the canal and also the one that's been replaced the most. This is the concrete version and was very popular as a swimming place. The canal was, I'm sorry, the aqueduct was rebuilt about, I'm going to say 10 years ago. This is the rebuilding in timber, and it shows you the inner structure. This is the finished work, and this is a view looking north through the aqueduct. When Ida struck recently, the stormwater ripped out the lining of the aqueduct, but it's since been repaired. Point Pleasant has the distinction of having two locks, locks 15 and 16. They're rather close together. And this is a postcard that says Lower Black's Eddy, which was the first name for Point Pleasant. There really wouldn't be any interpretive signs along the Delaware Canal telling its stories without the efforts of the Friends, both in funding and producing them and installing them. And these are the volunteer installing them. The first signs along the Delaware Canal were a joint project with the Delaware and Lehigh National Heritage Corridor. And then the Friends branched out from those generic signs to place site-specific signs. Aha, we come to the place called Devil's Half Acre. It's just above Lumberville. And here's where the devil tempted canalers with many things: women, booze, all the things that can get you in trouble. This little building may have been incorporated into the home that's currently there. Just north of Lumberville was the location where this photo was taken. And it was repair work done after the flood of 1903, which was of comparable height to the flood of 1955. I like it because it illustrates just how laborious it would have been to build the entire length of the 58.9 miles of the canal. Pesky muskrats. They dig holes in the canal's banks. Those holes get bigger with water flow. The bank blows out, and you have a very costly repair. When the canal was in commercial operation, people could trap muskrats and get a quarter a tail, which was a good sum. This is Lock 12 in Lumberville and Lock 12 in the 1990s, illustrating that the canal has been an artistic inspiration. Here in Lumberville, you have the canal and river and the pedestrian bridge that connects Bulls Island in New Jersey to Lumberville. This is also the place that's along the canal that suffers catastrophic flooding when the incoming creek flows heavily. Here's the Lumberville store, birthplace of Martin Johnson Head. It's H-E-A-D. And I can't tell you about him tonight, but you might want to look him up on the internet. A very interesting story. Coming south, we come to the Virginia Forest Recreation Area along the Delaware Canal. It's just north of Center Bridge, named for Virginia Forrest, a preservationist. And the Friends created the picnic area here, buying tables and installing grills and such, planting bulbs, and trying very, very hard to propagate Virginia bluebells, and they just didn't take. Okay. One of the most famous of Bucks County's Impressionist painters was Edward Redfield, and he lived at 3 locations along the canal. This is the second of his homes. And here is the bridge that's called the Redfield Bridge. The home we just saw is the white building that you can view underneath the bridge. And this is the best example that the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Recreation has attained in rebuilding bridges over the canal to both illustrate the authentic bridges while also having a bridge that can accommodate the weight of modern vehicular traffic. This is my favorite lawn ornament along the canal. We're in Center Bridge. At the time when the covered bridge still ran from Center Bridge over to Stockton. And the covered bridge burned in 1923. And Edward Redfield was coming home, saw the fire, and made his way back to the scene, did a quick sketch, and later created the painting that is now today his most acclaimed painting, The Burning of Center Bridge. And it was atypical. Usually he painted in one fell swoop. This time he did a sketch and painted later. At Center Bridge, we have one of the 7 loop trail system crossings. The loop trail system consists of 7 bridges over the Delaware River that connect the 2 canal towpaths, the Delaware Canal in Pennsylvania and the Delaware and Raritan Canal in New Jersey. And the loop trails have become one of the most popular features of the canal because you don't have to backtrack. We've made it to New Hope, and I call this the Jack Sprat slide. The canaling was often a family affair, and in this case, Dad, much like Jack Sprat, could eat no fat. It looks like his wife could eat no lean, and the two kids look like they take after Dad. This is a painting of a canal boat going under Bridge Street in New Hope, and it was done by Fern Coppage, one of the noted impressionists. I figured for the very longest time that Fern Coppage was taking artistic license and painting that stone arched bridge. And then I found a photograph that shows that that bridge was a stone arch bridge indeed. So New Hope has 4 locks, to compensate for the drop in elevation in the river at Wells Falls. This is lock 11, the most northern of the locks. The lock tender's house is over here. There was a general store next door. There was a barn here, and across the canal was the wicket shanty, where the mechanisms to operate the lock were housed. And in this case, the canal boat is getting ready to float right into the lock. Lock 11 is the only lock on the Delaware Canal that's capable of being operated. And the lock tender's house is the headquarters of the Friends of the Delaware Canal, where there's a mini museum about life at the lock. This lock tender's house is a bank house. This level down here is on Main Street. The second and third stories are up on the towpath level, and it was quite the ordeal to paint. New Hope was a busy place. All the locks in New Hope were made double wide in the 1850s because there were traffic jams. There was so much, it was the busiest time during the canal's era of commercial operation. So these boats illustrate that many of the canal boats, in fact, the majority, were owned by the Lehigh Coal and Navigation, LC and Nav Company, with the number of the boat. And their logo was this bullseye. The Lehigh Coal and Navigation Company took over the canal after the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania decided that it didn't want to operate a canal, and the company ran it until it became a state park in 1931. Here's what Lock 10 looked like at the turn of the 20th century. Today, Lock 10 doesn't exist, and the canal's waters run through a culvert pipe under South Main Street. Canal boats needed to be repaired, and here in New Hope, there was a repair enterprise. This is Lock 9, and the house on your right doesn't exist anymore. And this is a significant site. We have Lock 8 over here on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, you have an outlet. Here in New Hope, a canal boat could change their course. And instead of going south toward Bristol and Philadelphia, they could use the outlet to cross the Delaware Canal via cable ferry and then enter the Delaware Canal, the Delaware and Raritan Canal in New Jersey to go to the New York market. Also at this location was the River House, built in the late 1700s, first to accommodate river raftsmen, then canal boatmen, and famously became Chez Odette. Today, the building has been moved, and this location is essentially dwarfed by the very large River House hotel and event venue that's been built there. The outlet serves today as an inlet, and that inlet supplies Delaware River water for the entire southern end of the canal. And when the Delaware River falls below the level of the inlet level, the Delaware Canal is water starved, thus a huge problem. Almost as soon as the Delaware Canal was undertaken, in 1827, the engineers realized that the Lehigh River water coming from the north wasn't going to be sufficient to water the southern end of the canal. So in 1829, Louis Coryell was commissioned to build 2 water wheels, essentially to convey water from the river over and into the canal. The water was also used by Union Mills on that location. The water wheels remained in operation until they were washed away in 1936. Water in the southern end has been a perennial problem. Today, moves have been made by the Friends to compensate for their loss by installing a large pump down at the Bowman's Hill section of Washington Crossing Park. But that's been problematic. Wouldn't it be nice if we could build water wheels, but we're beyond that. It's a lovely, lovely view from the Delaware Canal towpath of the moon rising on a winter night over the hills of New Jersey. Friends volunteers have kept the 6 authentic camelback bridges coated with traditional barn red stain. This bridge is the Thompson-Neely Camelback Bridge in the northern section of Washington Crossing Historic Park. And if you cross this bridge, you'll be able to go to the Thompson-Neely house. That's the name. Heading south, the canal flows through both the northern section and the southern section of the northern Washington Crossing Historic Park. And show-off marshmallows can be found in abundance in this area. Really beautiful. This photo illustrates just how narrow the separation between the canal and the river can be. It also shows what I think is one of the canal's greatest virtues in today's world, and that is that it's preserved green space. And having the state park and the canal in place has certainly saved the land along the Delaware Canal from being developed as it surely would have been by now. Another one of the camelbacks, in this case, goat farm, because there was a goat farm on the other side once. Red-bellied turtles do live in the Delaware Canal. They are Pennsylvania threatened species. Because of their inhabitants, there are restrictions as to when the canal can be drained and work can be done. So no work can be done between October and April when the red bellies are in hibernation. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go really fast. I'll slow down. Lock 7 in Lower Makefield Township was restored by the Friends of the Delaware Canal. And in this case, you're seeing 2 students from the Bucks County Community College Historic Preservation Program getting hands-on experience. And they worked under the master restorationist, Richard Harlow, who has since died. This is the finished product, and Mr. Harlow wisely believed in not gussying anything up too much. Along the canal, in the vicinity of Scudder's Falls Bridge, I-295, one can find an abundance of cardinal flower blooming. There's really no other place along the canal where there's quite so much. And in this case, being enjoyed by a black swallowtail. Winter's fun on the canal. And this is Summers Bridge, another of the camelbacks, and the most southern one. It is in Lower Makefield Township, and the Friends of the Delaware Canal spent, I believe, $70,000 restoring this bridge over the past summer, and it's back in wonderful shape now. In the town of Yardley, there was the Leadham Coal Yard. Coal yards sprang up all along the canal, taking advantage of what was being hauled. The last canal boat filled with coal to run down the Delaware Canal was laden for the Leadham Coal Yard, and the descendants have a bill of lading dated 1932. This photo illustrates a hinge boat, which was the most popular type of boat used on the canal. It was built in 2 sections, 1 and 2, and then they were connected in the middle. In this case, they're being unloaded with a conveyor system. And this pole is the only thing on this site that remains of the canal days. One can skate on the canal if the weather cooperates. And while we're on fun, canal festivals have been held in Yardley, Morrisville, and Bristol, and they've brought many an unusual vessel to the canal. And ducks can race on the canal in Yardley. Hundreds of yellow rubber duckies were dumped in the canal. They not exactly raced, they leisurely made their way to the finish line. And at the finish line, they had to be retrieved because you can't leave ducks litter the canal. These are Canal Action Team volunteers building the potty barn, essentially an enclosure for a porta-john to make things look a little nicer than a plastic porta-john sitting along the canal. And here the volunteers are with their finished work. Buck's Beautiful planted tens of thousands of daffodils and narcissus along the canal towpath. And here we have a charming photograph of a beaver. Beavers really, really like the canal because it has such convenient places to build dams. But damming the canal flow is not a good idea at all. It'll overflow its banks. So the state park does have beavers transported, and the adjoining property owners to the canal don't really mind because beavers really like to cut down ornamental trees too. In Morrisville, one can see the skyline of Trenton from the towpath, and as well as the gold Capitol Dome. Morrisville had an active waterworks along the canal, but it used water from the river in processing. This is probably the classic photograph of an authentic camelback bridge with the kids sitting on the bridge, waiting for the boat to come by, probably going to throw something down on the boatman. And this little structure to the left was the shack for a canoe club. So, woolly bear caterpillars on the Friends annual canal walks, which are held in the fall. It was also always a good game to sight woolly bears and figure out whether the woolly bear was predicting a cold winter or a warm winter, depending on how much dark fur, I'll call it fur, they had on them. The darker, the colder. Development created many obstructions along the canal, particularly from Morrisville south. In this case, a railroad siding that runs in this direction to the right was constructed over the canal, and the canal waters were just put through a pipe. In order to get around this hillside obstruction, anyone using the canal had to detour around and to a place that was very, very close to the railroad and Amtrak lines. In fact, the Acela line runs on this track. So it was a very dangerous condition. Fortunately, the funding was found to build a tunnel to route the towpath under the railroad embankment, and walkers and bikers, etc., can go through safely, but the canal waters still go through a culvert pipe. This is only for pedestrian traffic. In Falls Township, in some places in Bristol Township, the canal is truly a green oasis. And it's easy to forget that over to the left are active railroad tracks, and to the right are industrial uses. It's a very, very peaceful place. Great blue herons can be found all along the canal. I think they're the canal's official bird. And noisy frogs. Every year, since the founding of the Friends 40 years ago. It's the 40th anniversary of the Friends. Cleanup days have been held, attracting 300, 400 people along the entire length. And sometimes you have to collect leftover Halloween spiders. Another obstruction were the 4 lanes of Route 13 at the Levittown Shopping Center. 2 tunnels were built to overcome this obstruction. And as a leader of the Canal Walk, I was totally relieved, because when you used to cross Route 13 physically, I just pray and tell people to really rush. Poison ivy grows abundantly along the canal. This is its fall guise with pretty red leaves and berries that birds absolutely love. When canal boatmen saw this site, the Grundy Mill with its clock tower erected in 1911, they knew that their journey was coming to an end. They only had about a mile to go. Okay. This is the Bristol Lagoon, and this is the only body section of water intentionally built on the Delaware Canal for recreational purposes. And you're indeed recreating during a canal festival with a decorated boat. This is an excellent aerial view of Bristol Borough, taken in 1920. You can see the lagoon with its little peninsula. You have the Grundy Mill, and crossing the canal, you have 2 bump bridges, one here at Jefferson Avenue and one here at Washington Street. And bump bridges opened by the canal boat hitting it and literally pushing it open. And then after the boat passed through, the bridge would close back up. So you have the Grundy Mill, you have the canal heading down to the canal boat basin, where boats gathered prior to either going out into the Delaware River or starting their journey northward again. Get rid of that. Commerce popped up, as I said, all along the canal. Bristol, Yardley, Morrisville, New Hope, and towns north. This is a view of very prosperous times in Bristol. And this would have been Lock 3. Okay. The canal is near its end, and canal boats are about to turn into the basin. Excess water from the canal was released here at the head of the basin into Otter Creek and the Bristol Marsh. It was a nice waterfall. This view shows you a view inland to the basins, and you can see the canal boats lined up. There's the old remnants of the old carpenter mill, one of Bristol's first industries. And you have the toll collector's house, because yes, you did have to pay a toll to use the Delaware Canal. This, again, is a postcard that's incorrectly labeled. It says it's lock 1. Actually, this was the tide lock, holding out the tidal waters of the river from the canal. Lock 1 is at the head of the basin. So you can't necessarily trust what old postcards say. And again, a postcard with the view from the tide lock out into the river. Here in Bristol, we have the terminus canal because the river was deep enough to reliably navigate the loaded boats. The boats were lashed together and then towed by steamboats down to Philadelphia or points along the way, and points sometimes north in New Jersey and certainly to towns southward in New Jersey. So there you've seen the Delaware Canal. And I love this photo particularly. The Delaware Canal has always been a challenge ever since it was first built, but people have loved it, they have supported it, and they have kept it going over all these years from 1827. And our hopes are certainly that they will continue to do so. And I'm done. Thank you so much for listening and seeing these wonderful pictures, which I just can't help but share because they're so good. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing, and I guess you're gonna see Cindy.
Hey, I'm back. Yes, thank you. That was very interesting. I really enjoyed the photos. So I do have one question. So basically, when the boats reached their final destination and were emptied, were they transported back, either empty or a different cargo, or disassembled with the lumber and sold?
The company boats were transported back, often loaded with finished goods from the cities, often emptied and sometimes disassembled, but not very often. It's interesting, when the canal went out of business, many of the boatmen just abandoned their boats along the sides of the canal. So there's still remnants of canal boats in the Delaware Canal. And we found some in Tullytown, right next to the Levittown Shopping Center, which is really unusual.
Wow. Someone commented some places look too narrow to get a 10-foot boat through, nor do they look deep enough.
Not anymore, they're not deep enough. The dimensions of the Delaware Canal are a 40-foot wide prism and 12 feet of towpath and 8 feet on the opposite side, which is called the berm side. But the canal is meant to be 40-foot wide and originally meant to be at least 5 foot deep.
And this kind of ties in. What's happening to parts of the canal in PA where there is no water and appears to suddenly be dry in areas?
That's because we had a lot of damage from Tropical Storm Ida, and Tropical Storm Ida took out one of the culverts up north of Upper Black Eddy, and there's no longer an intact prism to hold water. So there's water from Bristol down to Upper Black Eddy, and then water can't run any farther. When it rains, it fills with water. And then, of course, during the summer's drought, the river dropped below the level of the inlet in New Hope. So that starved the canal.
Yeah, with these storms, the Friends' work is never done.
Yeah.
So how often do you find historic photos of the canal and you cannot pinpoint the exact location? I believe no one has been able to identify an Arnold Brothers postcard location that is labeled as near New Hope.
Yes, and that remains a mystery. No one has been able to figure that out. The buildings aren't familiar. The topography isn't familiar. So it's hard.
And this might be one of the last ones. We heard they're going to flood part of the canal near Treasure Island. Is that true?
I'm sorry. They're going to what? The canal?
Flood part of the canal near Treasure Island.
Not with water from the Lehigh River until those problems are fixed up north.
Another one just came in. Do you have a favorite section of the canal, and what is your favorite season along it?
Well, now that I'm retired from the Friends of the Delaware Canal, I guess I can have a favorite. And my favorite is up by the Nakamixon Cliffs. The scenery is utterly lovely, and there's so many good stories related to that particular area. So I'll admit to a favorite, though I like the whole thing. And like everybody, spring and fall, each has its virtues.
Okay, there are a couple more that came in. Where were the mules stored? Did the boat owners rent them?
Sometimes they rented them. Along the way, they overnighted the mules in barns offered by local property owners, and they paid, fee to have their mules taken care of in the barns. There's sort of a popular notion out there that every building along the canal that looks like it could have been a barn was a mule barn. Not so.
And yeah, I remember in New Hope when they were able to run the barges, was it 10 years ago? I remember them storing them off of this one farm off of River Road. Yeah.
Right. The in quotes, mule barge ride in New Hope stopped operating in 2007 after the 3 devastating floods. And here, I'll tell you the story of barge and boat. The reason that the use of the term barge is so ubiquitous is because when the New Hope Canal boat ride opened in 1954, the owner used scows, work scows, open boats, and put canopies on top. And he decided that it wasn't a marketing plus to be calling it the New Hope Scow Ride. So he decided that it would be called the New Hope Barge Ride. Canal boatmen consistently used the term boat. In fact, we used to do programs with a man who was a boatman when the canal closed. And if someone said barge, he would get all red in the face and go, no, it's a boat. So I cannot make that mistake.
Yes. And does the canal have to have water, or will its absence cause it to collapse?
Water is vital to the canal. When it doesn't have water, you have its wooden structures deteriorate. You have vegetation grow up in the prism, and it generally deteriorates. It doesn't necessarily collapse from its own weight, but its structures suffer greatly.
And looks like this might be the last one. Is there a trail ambassador program? For example, folks on bikes providing assistance information to visitors.
The Friends of the Delaware Canal have a program called Canal Tenders, where the tenders adopt sections of the canal. And I believe that the Delaware and Lehigh Trail program has an ambassadors program. And the Delaware Canal is part of the 145-mile long Delaware and Lehigh Trail. So check them out if you want to be an ambassador. Help people find their way. Fix their broken bike chain.
Yes, that's always helpful. And also, I'm sure the Friends of the Delaware Canal are looking for volunteers to help maintain and keep it going.
Of course.
So it looks like we don't have any more questions. And I just want to say thank you for your presentation. It's very enlightening and the photos were beautiful, very informative. Thank you so much.
Good. And now we can go watch the Fetterman-Oz debate.
May your favorite candidate win.
Yes, vote. Do vote.
Please vote, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.
No, thank you very much.